Good morning. This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and we're doing something a little different this morning because KX with Ken has returned. I'm really excited, Ken,
Thank
because um, I've always found our conversations on your podcast very interesting. I know you needed to take a break this past summer, and for all of you out there, when you go to the show notes, please click on Ken's website because it's not that Ken took a hiatus just to sit around. Um, all your talents have just come out of the blue. Um, and I love it. He has a cartoon character, he's painting, he's spending time with his grandbabies, doing a lot of things. But then out of the blue, he started blogging again. And that's when I said, hey, we need to talk about these things
Yeah,
because,
and yesterday I went back to starting to. I used to do my movie reviews on yakkinback.com.
yeah,
When I used to go to the movies in New York, when you could
yeah,
go to the movies all the time, and then the pandemic hit and I stopped going to the movies. Well, you can go to the movies again. So I think I'm revving up. I
wow,
saw the Many Saints in Newark, the Gandolfini thing. Yeah, I wrote that one up yesterday. So
right.
add
And
that
that's,
to.
yeah, and that's on the website so people can read that and we'll even talk about that as we go forward. So, but the one thing that you wrote that really caught my attention was the blog on credentials. And, um, you know, we're living in a very strange time right now. And I think you and I, based on our ages, we're seeing that the world has sort of flip flopped. It's not where at least I thought it was going to be when I was growing up. So take it from there. I mean, do you think that um, we're at the point where you thought, hey, when I'm in my 70s and 80s, things are going to be just like they are today?
No, I gave up my chance for the revolution back in the 60s. When I was a young man growing up, I said, we have a powerful young generation. There's a lot of us. And by the time, I'm 30 or 40, we'll take over. And by the time I was 30, there was Nixon. And by the time I was 40, there was Reagan. And then there was Trump. I mean, it's like the only chance we had was when we had Kennedy, we had a little bit of a run there, and Clinton before he got nuts. So I never really saw my people in power to change it. We just keep doing this military industrial complex. They keep going for the wars in crazy places because that's how the Republicans make their money. Uh, and so, talking about, well, who has say so? And what does that mean? And who gets to say so? And I started thinking, well, I said, well, that's about credentials. You need credentials to go to court.
Right.
Somebody has to have the authority to speak. You can't just raise your hand in the audience, get up and go. You need a lawyer or you need somebody, and the lawyer is sanctioned. And so, how do you get sanctioned? Was my original idea when I started to write about credentials. And I remember as a kid, I had no credentials, and I didn't look like I was ever going to get any credentials. And I was wondering, well, maybe Kerouac and Woody Guthrie and those guys were right, that you get your credentials by experience. You get your say so by having seen, done, been, and uh, that led me to take off. And at 23, I took off. I wrote a couple of books about all this stuff. But the idea was to go out and gather that experience, hit the road,
Right.
feel the red dirt under your feet, go to a barn dance, work in a farmer's field, uh, go hang a fence in Texas, ride a horse somewhere. And what I found is while I was hitchhiking, you know, when you're 23, you don't really know a hell of a lot.
Right.
And I was hitching to California, and I had $75. You know,
Well, back then, $75 was a lot of money.
yeah, but if you're gonna go to a motel and try to
Yeah.
eat every day,
Okay.
or get
Okay.
a normal place to stay, 75 doesn't go so much. And
Right.
I got to about somewhere in the South, the short South, maybe South Carolina, and I was already down to $10. You know, I mean,
Yep.
so it was like, and I was getting great rides. I wasn't taking buses. You know, I was getting free rides everywhere, and a lot of the time people were putting me up, and you know, I got lucky a couple times, and but I needed money, and I had the good fortune uh, when my grandmother retired with my grandfather, and they went to Florida, and I took over their apartment. And the first thing I did was to chop her dining room table. I took the top off the dining room table, this heavy, heavy, heavy maple top, and I said, I don't need the bottom part. I'll just leave the top. So I threw out the bottom part and went and bought myself a pool table. And I put a pool table in the dining room and put the top back over it and put a cover so that when my mother came over, she wouldn't go out of her mind
I love it.
that I had, chopped up Nanny's dining room table. I didn't need a dining room table for 8 people. You know, I was eating sandwiches in the kitchen. But I was in college at the time, so I started practicing pool. And I played for hours and hours and hours, practicing shots, et cetera, et cetera. And I really got pretty good. I figured, hey, I can shoot a pretty good game. So when I was on the road, the opportunity comes, you go into a bar, there's either talkers or players, and most of them are talkers. And so the way to do it is to tell them you're going to beat them. Because if you beat them, then you told them that you're going to beat them. If not,
Right.
you lose your money and you leave and you go. But nobody beats you up outside. So I would go in and I would tell these guys, I'm going to beat you. And in pool and males and egos and alcohol, oh yeah, why that? Where you from with that accent? You know. And then we started shooting pool, and before you know it, I was making a lot of money, and I made enough money to go through the rest of the trip, and it was like, well, I just got my first credential. I'm now a pool player. I could be a good pool player, but I didn't want my life to be spent in the pool room, and I didn't want credentials as a pool player. So it was like the idea of, well, if you do something really well, they recognize you for it, and then they pay you for it.
Right.
So, what can I do next? Well, when I finished these hitchhiking tours in the States, I liked the idea, so I did it in Europe. And I wound up in Portugal, in the Algarve, on the Mediterranean in southern Portugal, Albufeira, Lagos. And there was a cafe that everyone in Europe vacations into the south of Spain or the south of
Right.
Portugal. And they referred to at that point as Eurotrash. You know, they were rich, spoiled kids who came down looking for, this was in the early 70s. The French New Wave cinema was the slice of life, in the moment kind of theater world, spontaneous world.
Okay.
Well, that was right up my alley. I had done theater in New York on Wooster Street, which is an improvisational theater house. And We set up bleachers and people came in. And what we did is we asked them for a dream. And they would tell us part of a dream, and then we would take off on the dream and make crazy endings and get everybody involved. And it was good and it was fun. So here I had the idea I could do the same thing. If I got a crowd together and got a little bit of a stage, um, we could have some fun. So I talked to a cafe owner, and sure enough, he liked the idea because it meant more money for him, and people would come in. So we set up a rickshaw a little stage, and we got some people said improv tonight with, host Ken, blah blah blah, and people came in, and I said, all right, let's do this. Now they're French, they're Spanish, they're Belgian, you got 15 languages going on. So I said, we're going to do some theater. And who wants to tell me about their family? Who's got a nutty family? Oh, all the hands went up.
Well, we all do. Yeah.
All right. So the person would come down and they would tell me about their family. And so then I would pick volunteers from the audience to come down and we'd huddle. All right. You're going to be the dad. Now,
Yep.
you don't listen to anybody. You know everything. Blah, blah, blah. And mom, you can't say anything. Every time you go to talk, somebody's going to cut you off. And the kids are going to argue, and off we go. And we start doing this improv theater. And it was a huge hit. People loved it because it was the right time for that kind of stuff. It was improvisational, active, and you had a participation. So it wasn't you were just sitting back in your chair. It was really worked well. And the cafe owner was making money because he was serving drinks and food and stuff like that. And this became a thing. So I became known as the improv guy, walking around Albufera, and I never paid for a meal. I never paid for a drink. It was like, he was glad to feed me and take care of me. And
Sure.
I had a lot of fun. And so I said, I just got another credential. So I come back to New York and I'm saying, well, I can either shoot pool or I could do improv theater, but I can't make a hell of a lot of money at either one. And that's when I thought I had to get serious. I really had to get serious with my life. I was almost 30 years old now, and I had to make some money. So I used my Army experience and got into Columbia. And because I was poor, they gave me a scholarship. And once I got that, I had my first legitimate credential. I could now work in the real day world. I don't think I'd ever had an office, a day job I was a bartender. I was a waiter. That's how I made my money. So now I had to switch. I had to go out and buy a shirt, a pair of pants, a pair of shoes, look like something, And I started to, I got a job as a therapist in an outpatient clinic. And, I paid enough that I had my first money above my needs, that I actually had more money
Sure.
at the end of the month than I started. Usually I had about the same amount of money or less by the end of the month.
Sounds familiar. Yep.
So, so from there, then it was serious credentials. I was starting to become a therapist. And so, here's that world of credentialing. Who says you can say what you say? Who says you have the right to treat people? Who says you're allowed to collect money for it? Who says the insurance company is going to reimburse people to see you? All of that has to do with say-so. And here's the hierarchy of the city government, the state government, the federal government, the licensing boards, all that kind of stuff. So it sets up a step-by-step progression. The first thing after getting my master's was to get what was called an ACSW, the Association for Clinical Social Workers.
Okay.
you had to be in practice and see people and be supervised by an ACSW certified therapist. So,
Okay.
so each week you would meet with this person, present your cases, present what you think the diagnosis was, present what your treatment plan was, et cetera, et cetera. You do that for 2 years. And then they give you an ACSW certificate, which means you are now certified uh, to practice, but you still need to be practicing under ACSW guidelines. So
Okay.
those days, a psychiatrist had to be in charge. This was before social workers were autonomous. So you had to work in a clinic or work for somebody, and he supervised and signed off on your work. So from there are state licenses. Um, I decided at that point, after I was on my own, I had my ACSW, my private license, that I wanted to do family therapy. So I had to get certified in family therapy. Now, Salvador Minuchin is an Argentinian psychiatrist, one of the 5 or 6 pillars of the family therapy world. And he had a training program at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. It was at
Okay.
Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic. It's a well-reputed place. I was lucky enough because you apply, that doesn't mean they take you. So it was a fairly elite program, and I was lucky enough to get into it and spent 2 years there. This was supervision with a one-way mirror. You had the clients in the room, you had him in the back room, and all the staff, and there was a telephone on the wall, and he would watch the session live. And then the phone would ring, and you had to quit the session, stop, pick up the phone. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Hang up, go back, do what he told you. I mean, it was brutal. It was like swimming in a fish tank, and everybody's watching you.
Right.
But you gain confidence and expertise. And after 2 years of that, I got a certificate in family therapy, which is now means I could practice by calling myself a family therapist.
Okay.
But for insurance to pay, you had to do that for 2 more years and get certified. So to get certified, there's a license. New Jersey State had a license that you had to sit for the licensing exam, a 5 hour brutal knock you down, ask you everything in the world from theory to practice to tough situations, clinical calls, et cetera, et cetera. But this was the last piece of the puzzle. And I passed. And once I passed that, then you get the license. Now, the license says you can be an autonomous practicer. You can have your own practice under your own name as a licensed family therapist, and that comes with insurance certification. So now the gods from Rome have descended and knighted you and said, you now have say. And this felt like the first time in my life that I could go to court and I could say, yes, I saw this person, I evaluated. I mean, I was running the psych emergency service in hospitals at this point. So I was diagnosing and triaging people that the police brought in, or the
Wow.
rescue
Yep.
squad, or people that were running down the street naked, and they would bring them in, and I'd have to triage them, evaluate them on the spot, decided if they needed to go in the hospital, if they needed medication, if they could go home, if they had to go to the state hospital. It was a in your face kind of do that in 20 minutes. Do an assessment within 20 minutes. So I was already doing that, but that was under the auspices of a hospital where there was psychiatrists. Now I was able to do that on my own. Anybody could bring anybody to me, and I was legally certified to evaluate them and make a referral. So with insurance companies now being able to pay, I could now have my own private practice. And I did that for 50 years, or just close to 50 years. And with all of those credentials, I could now teach. So I went to the graduate schools of Yeshiva University in the city and Columbia University. And I got on their faculty as a field instructor. And I was teaching their graduate students who would get credit for working in the hospital under my supervision. So I was now the guy signing off on
Right.
supervision. I kept laughing to myself all along. I said, am I really the guy now? I mean, am I really the guy that can write that stuff? It was like so funny. I was so used to being in the other chair, kowtowing to everybody, following the rules, doing what they told me, overriding my thinking, and
Yep.
finally now they were saying, well, what you think is okay. And it's a change. It's a real change. It's like what watch one, do one, teach one is the medical model. And so now I was at the point where I was up to teaching one. And so I decided to, what I wrote was the whole process of credentialing. And the wider scope away from me is that's what goes on in society.
Absolutely.
Look at if you're out on the street and you do something wrong. What happens? A cop shows up. Now, who made him a cop? Society made him a cop.
Right.
Society said somebody has to say there's the difference of right and wrong. There's laws, and if you break them, this is the guy you answer to. But what if that guy just arrests you for the wrong reason because he doesn't like your skin color, he doesn't like what you look like, or he doesn't like your attitude? Well, he's not the ultimate say. He can arrest you and bring you in, but then you go to court. Now in court, somebody else has the say. Now it's a judge. Now there's maybe a group of peers. Other people decide if you're guilty or not. Or if you get a lawyer, maybe you don't even have to go to court. Maybe you can work out a deal that you don't even have to go to court.
Right.
So you have all these different interplaying say-sos of what's finally going to happen. If you look in the military has a pecking order.
Right.
When you first come in, you are the lowest thing other than the grass that's growing, because everybody can tell you what to do. But after maybe 3 months, they give you a stripe on your arm. So now you're a private. You're the lowest of the striped people. You can only tell the guy who just came in, the guy who's crawling in the grass, what to do. But now if you stay in long enough, they give you 2 stripes. Now you're a corporal. Now you can tell a private and the guy who's crawling on the ground what to do. And you work your way up to a sergeant. Then you work your way all the way up. So it's like one of the things that I could never wrap my head around was there's 2 levels in military service. There's enlisted and officer. Now, enlisted goes from E1 to E9, 9 plateaus. By the
Okay.
time you're an E9, you're called a lifer. You've been in the Army for 18 years or 15 years. And you can tell anybody who is enlisted, anybody with a stripe under them, what to do. You're in charge. But the college graduate 19-year-old lieutenant who is still just about
Our system froze, and hopefully you'll get back in.
officers outrule everybody else. So now the officers have a rank. From there, you can go to captain, and you go to major, and then you go to lieutenant colonel, and you go to colonel, and you go to general. So you have these 2 tiers. All of what they're on say-so. They're on credentialing. They're on life and service. So for me, it was very interesting to watch this world of credentialing, how it interplays almost everywhere in our world. Uh, Go get a job. Try to get a job. The first thing they say, well, what's your experience? Do you have any recommendations? Anybody have you have a letter of recommendation? Well, that's your first level of credentialing. Somebody
Right.
says you can do something. I work here and he can pour a good drink, so you can hire him. Or she worked as a waiter, or whatever. So this was what I tried to write the other day.
Well, as I read it, I'm so glad that we're discussing it because so many things come to mind. Um, you know, just in the family, there are credentials. When you are a child, your parents have the say so. Your older siblings, if you have older siblings, have more say so than you do because
They put in
ex-
charge of you.
right. And there's experience. Um, and sometimes I know that we sit on the sidelines and we say, it's not fair. Okay. Um, you know, I have all this education, but I just haven't put it to use. And yet there's someone like yourself who has hit the road. You've learned things even before you got the so called formal education to do what you wanted to do. Um, and I think that's interesting because I think back in the 60s and 70s, we had a little more opportunity to experience life around us um, before we settled into what we thought was going to be our job for life.
Mm.
You're one of the few that I know who actually found that career and stayed in it as long as you did, because so many people started jumping from career to career in the 70s and 80s. We just weren't a real happy society. We wanted more and more and more, but most of them weren't as devoted as it sounds like you were. Okay.
I was lucky. I really was. Everybody who knows me says I'm the luckiest guy in the world because just things that happened to me. I was this close to going to Vietnam. But I raised my hand, and the whole volunteer story came up, and the guy saved me at 2 in the morning. Out in the rain when everybody else got on the bus for Vietnam, and they told me to go back in the barracks. And I never went to Vietnam. I went to Heidelberg, Germany, and got trained in the psychiatric clinic. So my military experience, which could have killed me, actually turned out to be the thing that got me my ticket to ride at Columbia. And you know, and, and when I got back from the military uh, and went to school, I was 31 when I got out. And I still didn't know if I was going to be a therapist or not, because I had gotten there by working in Greenwich Village. I knew all the cafe owners, I knew all the bar owners. I was a bartender and a waiter in 100 places. And I saw a lot of guys who made a lot of money by running a saloon. And I met them in Europe. They worked
Right.
6 months a year, and now they were vacation. They were 29 years old, 30 years old, 32 years old, and they're working 6 months a year, and they have to go to the American Express once a week to pick up their check. I know how you. That's these guys. They're living in villas in Spain, and picking up their checks once a week from New York. I said, that's a formula. Boy, that I could do that. And then I had been acting and in theater and doing improv, and New York was pretty wild back in the early '70s, and I already had a TV show on Thursday nights called Village and Neighborhood Television. And I had a borrowed video camera, and I would run around the village interviewing people and doing topics of the day. And I was like, thought of myself as being a young Ed Bradley. Eventually, I'd get on 60 Minutes, and I'd do the same thing for 60 Minutes. I had all these ideas about I don't know. I mean, if I go as a therapist, I'd have to get up in the morning, and I don't usually get up in the morning. I get up in the afternoon, because I'm up all night. And so I had these decisions to make, and I really didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to go back to the night world and do that, or what I call the day job, be a therapist. And what made the decision for me is the guys that I knew who were also successful in this night world, running restaurants, bars, etc., were starting to die.
Mhm.
Their late 30s. They burned out. There was too much women, too much alcohol, too much drugs, too much of the good life. These guys were partying all the time. I mean, they had a hell of a lot of experience that everybody else wished they had, but it was killing them. And I said, I'm on that track. The way I've lived the first 30 years, I doubt I got another 5 left. I got to get out of here. And I left Greenwich Village. That's why I left Greenwich Village, because I thought I would die if I stayed there. And it was another one of those fortuitous decisions, because I bought a house in the suburbs, my first house. I had no idea how to live in a house. I had no idea how to live in the suburbs, you know. So I kept my apartment in New York. I lived in the suburbs for 4 days of the week, and I came back to the city for the weekend.
Interesting.
But then I think I made the right decision. I went and took the day job, and then I really liked it. I liked teaching. I liked supervising. I got into group therapy, and actually, the medical director of the hospital that hired me was the national president of the Group Therapy Association. So
Okay.
he was my supervisor. Now, you didn't get any more credentialed guy than this guy who watched my groups. And before you know it, he invited me into their institute. They had a conference and institute every year. And the institute was for selective therapists who wanted to be a group member. These were guys who were practicing as group therapists. They now were the patients in the group when I was one of them for the first 3 or 4 years. And then he told me, I think you're ready. I want you to run a group. So I was now running a group of therapists. And I worked my way up to actually running a group. You had to have 10 years of group therapy experience to be in my group. So it was like, whoa, here's say
Yeah.
so, and I really liked it. And that was why I stayed in the profession for so long. The group is a family of a sort, but then that led me to real families where I ran multiple group family therapy, brought in 3 or 4 families. We had 15 people in the room
Wow.
talking about comparative parenting and talking about the strengths of families, the weaknesses of families, etc. And all of this was videotaped and taught live to students, graduate students were watching. So it was like interesting stuff.
Sure.
And I stayed with it. I really just I love doing it. And then I got into the New Jersey Family Therapy Association. So here's the certification group for people who do family therapy in New Jersey, and eventually wound up being the president. So
Well, so what I hear you telling our listeners today is that just going and getting the education, whether it was streetwise or through the institutions, that's not, that's part of it. But the real part is really getting involved and making yourself known. Some people can go out and study and get every certification they ever want, but if they don't put it to practice, if they don't work with people and networking is important, and that's what you did. Um, you know, you may not get as far as you would like. And so we can sit around and dream about being the best bartender, the best therapist, or the best of whatever. But you got to take the steps to get there. It's not, even though some things got handed to you, they got handed to you because you were there doing your best and getting noticed.
Making it happen.
Yes.
I think what separated me from the pack in some ways was I understood the art of doing it. It wasn't just the science of therapy. The art came from my world experience, from my talking to everybody, from the farmers in the Midwest to the elite, to the runaways, to the drug addicts, to working with the cops, to work, I was in all segments, working with the poor and the Lower East Side, New York, being a street social worker. And, those kind of experiences where you see the struggle of people, you see who made it, you see who didn't. You have immigrant families, and some turn to drugs and wind up in jail, and others turn out to be the leader of the district. And how does one do one and the other do the other from the same environment? It's just not making excuses for yourself and finding your path. And I had to do it on my own. I didn't have a hell of a lot of support at home, and I had no money, and to make it was just survival for me. But that experience, that groveling, poor, having to do it all on your own, gave me a way to say to people, stop feeling sorry for yourself. What's your plan? You're belly aching. Belly aching isn't going to get you out of the mess. What do you want? Somebody else to rescue you? And that kind of in-your-face kind of good advice therapist is what made me good at what I did. And people respected my honesty, and they knew that it was coming from experience and not a book. And they could trust that I knew what the hell they were feeling. When I went out and they were on the roof of the house ready to jump and they're talking to me, I'm yelling at them. I'm not coddling them. And you have to shake somebody out of what the fuck are you doing? Get down here. We'll talk about this. This is a problem that can be solved. What are you doing? And they get shit because they expect so much power from that position. And when you take away their power, they realize, oh my God, he's making sense. So it was trusting your gut, trusting the experiences that you had that overrode any theoretical approach to a life situation. You had to trust your gut that you could read this person in front of you correctly and then make a good decision that was good for them. And that's what I did all my life. I did that same formula. And the teachers I had a supervisor at Columbia when I graduated said, you're smart as hell, but what you're going to need is this book. And he gave me a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Okay.
So you have a Zen approach to things, but you have to know how to fix your bike.
I love it. Yep.
Yeah, right. And it fit with my Aquarian self. My Aquarian self has the head in the clouds, but my strength came from my feet on the ground. And so you have to be able to do both at the same time. I'll tell you an embarrassing quick story of where I learned that lesson.
Okay.
I was a freewheeling hippie in the 60s, and I had a whole group of people, and we left work one day and we said, let's go out to the beach. And we went out to the beach and we dropped some acid. Oh, yay. We'll to run around naked in the water.
Yeah.
And we had a great day. I mean, I'm counting granules of sand, figuring out how many granules of sand are on this beach, how many granules of sand are in the world, and I'm trying to see, well, when can I see a star? The sun's up, but at some point I should be able to, and I'm looking for stars and all kinds of stuff going on, having these great conversations, and we're figuring out who the little things are that are crawling along the beach, and they're going into the ground, and where do they go, and when are they going to pop up? We're asking all kinds of questions. Came home at the end of the day with second-degree sunburn. Never paid any attention that the sun was out. There's your life lesson. While you're cavorting and doing all the things that you want to do, you have to do it in connection to reality of where you are. And if the sun is up, you got to put on a hat and put on a lotion and cover up, because if not, you're going to get a second-degree burn. And that lesson stayed with me my whole life. No matter how much I was where I still had my cop eyes, I still saw things before other people saw it. I saw the danger before it was going to happen, because I had trained myself to be aware of my environment all the time. I could be walking with Jill down the road, and I'll see things, and she'll say, "How did you see that?" It's there. It's there. It's not that I made it up. It was there. My focus was not just in front of me. My focus is always what I call a cop eye. And when a cop walks into this scene, he can describe most details in the whole vision. The color of the jacket the guy was wearing, what color license plate was it, who was in that window down there, what was the bus doing, you see all of that at the same time. And that's basically what keeps you safe. It keeps you, that's your awareness. You know which street, I don't want to walk down this one.
Right.
Those guys over there, I'm going to back out. I'm not going to trust it. Those guys look like, they could be danger. And so, if you're a street social worker, you're in dangerous tenements, you're with street gangs, you're around that stuff all the time. And you learn. And that's, I think, what I tried to teach every student I had. And that your credentials just don't come from the book. They just don't come from this institution that we're in. They come from your ability to gather information every day of your life in every possible conversation. Any one conversation with any one other person has the potential to change your life if you're open to it.
Well, and that's the message that we provide here at New Cleveland Radio, not only on your podcast, but the others, is become aware. Don't walk around with blinders on. Know what's happening around you. Research it,
Mm-hmm.
and be careful on your research too, because make sure your research, is bringing you to the right information, because there's a lot of wrong information out there.
Yeah.
But again, if you're aware, you'll be able to decipher that.
My professors at Columbia beat me to death with the idea, you never just read one book about something. That's just one guy's opinion.
Exactly.
If you want to read a book about a subject, you got to go all different points of view. You got to get more than one view. It takes time, and you could be impatient, and you got a paper to write. So you read one article, and then if you read one article about it and you turned it into Columbia, you probably would fail the exam, because they would say, you didn't read this, you didn't read this, you didn't. It's not what you read, it's what you didn't read.
Well, and that's like when you're going to school and you're asked to write a paper, and a lot of times people don't understand it. And I didn't understand it when I was younger. You have to have 5 different references in this paper. And it'd be like, well, why? Why 5? I found this great guy who, wrote all about it, and I really believe it. So I just want to use him. But you're right. If you're only using that one reference, you only have one point of view that you're looking at.
I mean, I used to laugh out loud when a student would come in and they would, in their first supervision session, they would say, "Well, what book should I read?" You know, you mean what section of the library should I
Yeah.
point to?
Exactly. Well, and that's why I like it when I went back to complete my degree as an older adult. I took learning more seriously.
I remember that.
Um, and
Those
I
are the
t-
best students.
and I took it online because I knew that I had to really go teach myself. I was going to be given information that I was supposed to be working on, but I had to research it. I had to write it. I had to hone my skills. And, um, you know, when I went back for my master's, probably like you, I thought of it, hey, I've got this great credential, but I got it at a time when I still feel good about it. And I've told my husband it's going to go on my tombstone that I have my master's degree because I haven't been able to really use it anywhere other than developing this podcast, knowing how to research, knowing to be more aware, not to sit here and say, oh, Ken had every lucky break in the world. So look at him now. You worked hard
Right.
getting every single break you got. And part of it was your personality to get those breaks. People believed in you.
I remember at 19, it was clear as day. I said to myself, I can't do this thing. And what was I referring to? Was being an adult. I just said, I'm 19. I've been already working 5 years. I just got kicked out of college. I'm going to be working in a factory. I can't do it. I don't know what to do, how to do it. I said, the only thing I know is that I'm smarter than working in this factory. And the only way out of here is I got to go back to school. And I went back to night school, and then I went to day school. And finally, I got my college degree, which, gave me my first social work job, but it was not because I was lucky. It was because I failed. It is because I didn't have the correct formula. I didn't have any guidance. And I just thought, going to college was woohoo, drinking and partying and having fun.
Of course. Yeah.
And 2 years later, they said, thank you very much. But
there's the door.
there's the door. So, I had to leave. And I had about a little less than 1 year's credit after 2 years of work because nothing was going to transfer. I was just a young, stupid kid. So I don't think I was ever given anything. The things that I did, the breaks that I had is because I made them, because I volunteered or
Absolutely.
I took a risk or I stayed with something when it was hard. And I didn't quit. I wouldn't let myself quit after that. No matter what I did, if I went to something, I stuck it out. And, that eventually paid off. It eventually paid off.
Well, I'm glad we talked about credentials because I want our listeners to know that it's not impossible to move up that pecking order, but you have to want it badly enough. You have to want it for yourself, not necessarily for anybody else, because when you're doing it for somebody else,
Right.
I don't think you do as well.
And you have to wait. Things take time. You can't.
Absolutely.
Look at how many years where I'd have to wait 2 years for this, then I'd have to wait another 2 years for that, and each time you wait 2 years, you're not making money. You're just staying at the same level. And so, I saw everybody else around me. These guys had businesses or they were having paid vacations. And what the hell is a vacation? No less a paid one.
Right, exactly.
When I took off, it cost me. It always cost me. Yeah. And I was seeing these other, and now they're married and they got kids. And I said, how do you make enough money to be able to feed a kid and pay a mortgage and buy a car? Are you kidding me? I'm a Subway guy, you know. It's like, and it took all those years. So I started college at 18 and finally got my graduate degree at 31. So somewhere along the way, that wasn't a quick road. That road had a lot of detours on it, you know.
Well, you beat me by half because I got my master's at 62, but I was determined whether it promoted me at work or not, I was going to do it because it's something I wanted, something
Yeah.
that I needed. And I'll never forget when I told my mother that I had graduated. Of course, she wanted to go to a big ceremony with me, and I had no desire to walk across the stage because it wasn't for anything. I just wanted the degree. And she said to me, "Why was it so important?" And I said, "Because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, that I was smart enough." Because when I was 18 going to college, I didn't feel smart. I felt like I was on the bottom of the barrel, even though I wasn't. But when you feel that way, you don't do well. So you have to want to do it for you. And that's what I see you're doing now, Ken. You're writing, you're painting, you're cartooning, we're podcasting again.
Blogging.
And, and age has nothing to do with it.
No.
Okay. You can still do it. So why not?
Jill takes a lot of credit. She the other day we were talking. She said he's like a dynamo. He never stops. He's got all these things. He's never been as busy as he is now. And she said, you know why he's that way? And so I said, oh, here it comes. You know. She said, I gave him a homeopathic remedy. You know, because she's a homeopathic.
Right.
She said, I gave him an artistic homeopathic remedy, and all of a sudden he started painting.
Interesting.
So, interesting. So maybe, you know, I got rewired somehow, you know, because right now everything I do is around arts and creativity, and I'm just, you know, I've loved it. I've always been funky theater improvisational, and I've always liked art, but never was one who created it, and now, oh, it's so easy.
And we can see all your creations at kx.guru. And I love when I get to post them because I get to look at them more intimately. But I want people to go out there and see that, you know, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, I mentioned to you and a few others that I really thought I wanted to get into art. And I kept thinking about it. And then I bought some supplies and I looked at the supplies and I finally said to myself, I really don't want to do this. I don't know why I said I wanted to do it. And it's okay to change your mind. And, you know, I have the supplies if I ever decide, but I think I was doing it because I was watching you and a few other people with your art. And it was like, there once was a time I wanted to do this. So why not now?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? If it's not really deep in your heart, you're not going to do it. And so I thought, rather than do it poorly, I'm going to put it to a side. I'm going to do the things that make me feel good.
Yeah.
And, you know,
you're
that's
really developing this program. It's great to see your development, you know, with New Cleveland Radio. I mean, you really got a full show now.
I totally appreciate that. And I can't wait till we do your next blog next month. But our listeners can go and read the blogs ahead of time. And if anybody wants to join us, we will be doing these live as we are today on YouTube. And starting with the next one, I will keep the screen open so that if you're watching and you have comments, we can answer your comments.
I've always preferred an interactive. You know, if there was a live audience watching and they had questions or comments, or they wanted to disagree or wanted to discuss.
Absolutely.
That's really what I like.
So from here on in, and we will start promoting it so people will know to listen in. And if you missed it live, you're now listening it to, you're either streaming it or watching it later on YouTube, and that's okay. You can send us comments and we will make sure that we answer them. In the
Right.
meantime, have a beautiful day. The sun just came out here in Cleveland, Ohio.
That's it.
I love it. I see all the yellow out there right now. So I think I'm gonna go take a walk. I think that'd be
Okay,
good for me.
great. Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
great day.